Greetings and welcome to the channel. This is Mikhailov from Team Retrogue, where we like retro games and the devices that bring them to us. Now, I have been using the Lenovo Legion Go S for about 4 or 5 days now, and I have to say my opinions of it are kind of mixed. On the one hand, this is a device that I really love and enjoy, and I'm more than likely going to end up keeping and using. But on the other hand, I can't recommend it. And this is a very complicated device because this is a device that I fell in love with at CES, but there are just too many factors in play that really kind of make me hesitant to say this is the best handheld ever. And so in this video, we're going to put this device through its paces. We're going to go ahead and do a full review, and we're going to see if this device is worth $729 of your hard-earned dollar bucks. So with that, let's dive in and get to work. At time of recording, the Lenovo Legion Go S can be purchased at Best Buy for $729. This unit is a model with Windows 11, with a Z1 Extreme model and a SteamOS model coming later this year. This unit was purchased from the Best Buy website with my own funds and is a full retail unit experience. So let's hop onto our mount and ride into Spec Town, starting with the processing power. The Lenovo Legion Go S is powered by an AMD Ryzen Z2 Go processor. The GPU is integrated AMD Radeon graphics. The device has 32 GB of LPDDR5X RAM. Moving on to storage, the device has a 1TB hard drive with storage expansion via a microSD card slot. The screen is an 8-inch WXUGA OCI laminated screen with a 1200p resolution, variable refresh rate, and a 16:10 aspect ratio. Giving the device life is a 55 watt-hour battery. For connectivity, this handheld has built-in Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3. The device ships with Windows 11. Unboxing the unit is very interesting. There's a lot of cardboard and foam. This section here holds some literature, but also doubles as a stand for the Legion Go. Inside this small box is the charger, and inside all of this foam is the device itself. This time, there is no included case, which is a bummer. So I had to purchase an original Legion Go case from Amazon, and thankfully, the Legion Go S fits in there just fine. Alright, so let's get started on our device tour, and we're going to start here at the top of the device. Here we have ventilation along with 2 USB-C Thunderbolt ports for data out as well as charging. These are also capable of video out. Then you have an indicator light, a 3.5mm headphone jack, volume up and down, and you have a Lenovo power button with LED rings around it in the Lenovo Legion style. Now this does not have a fingerprint sensor, very similar to the original Legion Go. It's just a button, and there is no other sensor or anything to help you log in. You either have to have no password or you have to have your... Now let's take a look at the triggers, starting with L2 and R2. Now there's not a whole lot of travel here. It is just enough to be an analog stick, and it does feel nice and quiet when it's in analog mode. But if you use the switch on the back to switch it over to a digital mode, you're going to get even less travel, and then you're going to get a pretty audible click. So let's go ahead and test our bumpers and our triggers. This is L2 in digital mode. And then in analog mode. Now the bumpers are actually noticeably audibly loud. These are a very clicky bumper. It does feel like a dome connection, so here's that sound test as well. And I'm clearly seeing waves on the mic on Audacity when I'm hitting that. So that is audible, and that could potentially irritate a significant other in bed. Not that I would necessarily play this in bed anyway. It's kind of a chonky device. It does actually feel comfortable, and the weight is evenly distributed, so it is kind of a nice light feel to it. But when I was playing it in bed last night, I definitely did eventually feel some arm and some hand fatigue. Now, if you look on the sides, there's no I/O, but you can see there's a very nice matte texture here, and this is a very comfortable ergonomic grip. This actually feels really nice to hold, and I would even go so far as to say that this is one of the most comfortable handhelds that I've ever held, and that's part of what makes this device winning is the actual hardware design and the ergonomics combined with this beautiful 8-inch screen. Now, this isn't an OLED screen, but it doesn't matter. It's that good. Like, the colors are very rich and saturated, and I actually really enjoy playing games on this giant screen, at least the ones I can play. Joysticks, very good sense of travel. You also have, again, Lenovo branded LED rings, which you can customize in the Legion software. I made mine green. And you have very nice buttons too. Like, as far as the hardware goes, I really have zero problems with this device, and I am more impressed with the hardware than I am with the processing power and the software. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. The D-pad, it's okay. It's a bit of a mushy D-pad. I am a fan of circle D-pads, and I do like this D-pad. So, I don't know. I'm torn. Contratest? Let's do contratest. It is rock solid. I'm not moving unless I need to. As a matter of fact, those are really nice diagonals. This D-pad doesn't feel as good as other D-pads I've used, but as far as its usability as a D-pad, yeah, it is functional for games like Contra. Here's the Street Fighter test, and yep, I'm pulling off Hadoukens, no problem. Let's try Shoryuken. Nope. Nope. You have to be very deliberate on the diagonal. Like, you have to hit this little divot here if you want to perform a Shoryuken properly. Hadoukens don't seem to be an issue. Shoryukens, a little bit more difficult. Let's take a look now at the rest of the buttons on the front of the unit. So now let's take a look at the rest of the buttons on the front of the unit. You have your Legion space and your quick settings button up top here, and then you have start and select right underneath. Now, having start and select here is a welcome change from having them down here, because I hated having them down here on the default Legion Go controller. However, why they didn't put them at the top, I will never understand. I feel like the quick settings button needs to be down here like Asus and MSI do. But nah, Lenovo, you had to be different. You had to make it so that whenever I want to pause a game, I accidentally go into the quick settings instead. But that's unfortunately what we have, and obviously if you go into quick settings, you could change your performance. Right now I have it locked in at a 15 watt TDP. You could change resolution, you could change refresh rate, and you could do all this on the fly. You can also adjust controller settings, and you could set some quick menu shortcuts here. Also at the front of the device, you have this trackpad nubbin, and this is okay. It gets the job done, but it is harder to use with the thumb as opposed to your index finger. And I have the DPI turned all the way up, and you can actually do that right here in Legion space. So I have this turned all the way up. Now there is a touchpad vibration option, but it only has one option, on or off. And if you have it on, when you go to move the touchpad, you get a very audible vibration noise that is super duper annoying. Now, I like this haptic feedback, but I really wish that they had a way to turn it down and not off, and instead it's just either full blast or not on at all. So I've settled for just keeping it off because I'm only going to use the touchpad in certain scenarios, and it's not going to be used on everyday day-to-day usage. Now, also, another small complaint that I have is there is no navigation via desktop mode here. In other words, your controller layout is only just that. It's a controller layout. Now, one of the nice things that they did was in Legion space, you can actually assign mouse clicks. You can also assign keyboard clicks and shortcuts here, but you can't really change what the left sticks do. You can change up, down, left, right, but if you go into mouse, you can obviously see here there really is no option for move the mouse. The most you could do is take, like, say, the right trigger, and you could assign that to a left click or a right click, and then you can use that kind of in conjunction with the touchpad. But you'll need to actually set a new profile, which you can actually do here in Legion space. So you do have some workarounds here in Legion space for easily navigating windows, but you have to set that up yourself. It isn't like Asus or MSI's offerings where you can actually just set the controller profile to desktop and it's already done for you. Lenovo wants you to put some work into this. And coupled with the size of this trackpad, it just makes navigating windows kind of hard and weird and almost borderline unnecessary. I liked this when I saw it at CES, but now that I've had it in real world practice, I really don't care for it at all. You also have two front-facing speakers. At the bottom of the unit, you have 3 screws here and your micro SD card slot. Now the handheld is actually held together with these 3 screws on the bottom, as well as some hidden screws here at the top. So when we do eventually go to replace our hard drive, we're going to have to actually use a spudger and take this top plate off, and this thing is on pretty good. So I'm going to be doing a video that shows that process, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not looking forward to doing that. And then finally, on the back of the unit, you have plenty of ventilation here, and then you have your mappable Y1 and Y2 back buttons, as well as your joystick triggers. And I like that they only went with 2 buttons, because on the original Legion Go, all those extra buttons were present, and it just made for a tough experience because I would accidentally touch those buttons. But I also found that the original Legion Go was definitely much better for navigating windows because you had a bigger trackpad, and then you also had that wheel in the back for scrolling. So I do kind of miss that, but there's a lot that I don't miss from the original Legion Go, and that's going to be the ergonomic feel as well as the extra weight that that device had. Now let's get into device testing, and quick disclaimer, temper your expectations here. This is not a powerful device that is going to play 2025 AAA games. And when I review an x86 like this, I consider the more modern games to be a bonus. However, for those who want this to be more of an all-in-one machine and maybe more of a future-proof machine, I did test a few more powerful games, but I also wanted to mix in a few games that did indeed work well on this handheld. I tested all these games at a 15-watt TDP because I felt that performance gave me the best performance to battery life ratio, but it also was the closest comparison I can make to the Steam Deck OLED, which would probably be a competitor for this handheld, even though the Steam Deck is 3 years old at this point. Let's start with a game that's no stranger to this channel, Final Fantasy XIV. This game is running at laptop high settings at an 800p resolution. Under these settings, frame rate bounce between 40 and 60 frames per second, with some lower dips in limsa lominsa during busy periods. It never became unplayable and was actually a pretty enjoyable experience on this handheld. The trigger switches came in handy here, as limiting the travel allowed me to access some of my hotbar skills quicker. With 72% battery remaining, the handheld promised another hour and 43 minutes of playtime, rivaling that of the Steam Deck OLED during normal use. Moving on to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and it didn't work. AMD issue. Go figure. However, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade did work, and in the first mission, we're getting between 50 and 60 frames per second at low settings at an 800p resolution. At 65% battery, the device promises an hour and 38 minutes of playtime left before having to reach for a charger. Hogwarts Legacy started off a little rough at 800p low settings, but did stabilize at around 40 frames per second walking around Hogwarts. I'm not very far in this game, but I was at least sorted into Hufflepuff. Badgers unite. I had been taxing the battery at this point with all this testing, so we got down to 51%, and the system promised that it still had an hour and 16 minutes of battery remaining. So I went into another game that I truly enjoy, Monster Hunter Rise. I wanted to play this game because I'd customized my rideable dog to look just like my real-life dog, Frankie. And because I sadly had to have him put down this past week, I wanted to honor his memory by going on adventures and hunts with him. I was able to do this with no problem on the Legion Go S, as the game maintained frame rates in the 50s and 60s at average settings at an 800p resolution. Once I was done playing, there was 40% battery left, and the system reported 1 hour remaining. No Man's Sky ran at about 30 frames per second at low settings at an 800p resolution when I was on the space anomaly, but once I boarded my ship and got into space, things stabilized more between 50 and 60 frames per second. When I was done, there was 33% battery left, and the system said that I had 51 minutes of game time. Starfield ran like butt. Can I say butt and still be monetized? Anyway, it barely reached 30 frames per second at 800p, even in less crowded places like my spaceship. It even stuttered and struggled to load menus for things like shops. This game to me is the ceiling on what it is playable on this handheld at a 15-watt TDP, which means you'll have to crank things up, hampering your battery life. Now let's take a look at a few games that will run very well on this handheld when cranked up to the full 1200p, starting with the Unfinished Swan. I actually played and beat this game in 1 3-hour sitting on this handheld, and it was a gorgeous romp the entire time. I played this game for the Steam Machine podcast, and if you're interested in my thoughts on this specific game, definitely head over there using the link in the description and follow them wherever you get your podcasts from. I host regularly on that podcast just to talk about video games and some other stuff that comes to mind, and I'm going to be talking about my experience playing this game on the Legion Go S, as the 8-inch screen really captured the artistic visuals this game is designed to portray. And finally, I have to showcase one of my favorite games of the end of 2024, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Rita's Rewind, because this game is a good target for this machine, playing at the full 1200p resolution and maintaining its 50 frames per second target. This game can last up to 6 hours on the Legion Go's battery, which is a good spot to wrap things up with my final thoughts, starting with the positives. I was expecting a 55 watt-hour battery to be pretty bad, but it was actually not terrible. For the games that I regularly play, I was able to get enough playtime in my busy life to be able to enjoy the game for a decent amount of time before needing to reach for a charger. It's not a beast considering I had to play most of these games at low settings, but it's not all doom and gloom either. The screen is absolutely gorgeous to behold. And to my eyes, it rivals the screen of the Steam Deck OLED even though it's not an OLED panel. It also gave me a very similar experience to the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus, which may or may not be the same exact panel. Don't quote me on that, I'm not 100% sure. Let me know in the comments if you have more detail on that. Either way, I adore the screen. This is also the first handheld to have trigger switches to bounce between analog and digital on L2 and R2, which is a feature I use way too often. The fact that I finally have this feature on a handheld and not just on a controller is massive to me. But then that brings us to the negatives. And trust me, they are big ones. This trackpad is laughably bad. Either it's horribly loud or not responsive. I wish there was a better haptic engine at play here, and I'm hoping that maybe a software update to Legion Space will address this issue. Either way, I still wish it was a little bit bigger because I just found it to really not be usable. And unfortunately, this presents a bigger issue because there isn't really another way to navigate Windows on this specific device unless you go into Legion Space settings and you set it up yourself. And thankfully you can do that, but other handhelds already have it set up for you, so I find it a little bit jarring that I have to actually think to go in and program it myself. I also think that this handheld is not designed for Windows. It just strikes me as weird that I'm getting the performance that I'm getting under Windows when there are already videos out there that are showing that under SteamOS or Bazi or under a Linux firmware, games are performing so much better. It makes me think that Windows was kind of an afterthought for people who want it, and quite frankly, I think it's driving the price of this device up that they have to include a Windows license. Which brings me to the big one. Price. This thing is way too expensive for what we're getting. Honestly, this is probably not going to sell units at this price point, and a couple of things may need to happen here. One, they may need to offer a Linux version, or two, they need to just suck it up and drop the price of this handheld, which is going to happen over time. There's going to be sales, there's going to be open box, and I would say that if this handheld does down the line get itself down to a $400 to $500 price point, then we might be looking at something a little bit more competitive here. But right now, price to performance is absolutely 100% not there. Now, before I close out this video, I just want to go over why someone might want to purchase the Lenovo Legion Go S. And there are two potential categories of human given this specific chipset. The first person doesn't have any device at all and wants to play some light PC games, maybe a few modern games, and mostly emulation. To that person, I would say that at $729, this is not the device for you. I'd hate to say, just get a Steam Deck, brah, but this handheld is too expensive for what you get. And if you have $729 to burn, add another $70 to that, and you get a more powerful ROG Ally X, sacrificing the bigger screen and a few other features of Legion Go for a bigger battery and a stronger chip. Now let's talk about the person that maybe has an original LED Steam Deck and has enjoyed it since its release date and might be looking for something just a little bit more powerful. This person also wants an 8-inch screen, is going to sell his Steam Deck to help subsidize the cost of the Legion Go S, and just wants to play the same games he's been playing on a bigger screen. I might recommend the Lenovo Legion Go S to them, but not at $729, because then I can just suggest the original Legion Go for $600, and that handheld comes with a case, a stronger chipset, and extra features like the detachable controllers. I would even go so far as to recommend the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus over this handheld, even though it's a whopping $900, because At least if you're going to spend a ridiculous amount of money on something that could be a future investment, you'll be getting a more powerful device with a bigger battery. The only reality in which I would recommend this specific model is when the SteamOS model is released in May at $500, because I firmly believe that this device is not engineered or designed with Windows in mind at all. Windows feels like an afterthought on this device, and after this video goes live, I'm most likely going to install Bazite on my Legion Go S and call it a day. And I know the burning question in the Retro Handhelds Discord right now is Team Retrogue keeping this or returning it? Well, Sir Petey, loyal knight of the Discord, I'm here to tell you that I am actually keeping this handheld, because this handheld is just right for me. This isn't the handheld for a lot of people. Most people, in fact. And I don't think people should buy it until the price goes down. The hardware, engineering, and design is amazing. I love the 8-inch screen. I love the ergonomics. I love the trigger switches. And for the games that I specifically play, this device checks 95% of the boxes of things I want to see in something like the next iteration of the Steam Deck. I wanted to be an early adopter of the Legion Go S, and I paid for that privilege, with the understanding that I'm willing to accept this device's shortcomings, which is something that I don't think the majority of people are going to want to do. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this also the right device for you? And what do you think is the best use case for something like this? And please feel free to continue the conversation on the Retro Handhelds and Steam Machine Discords, where you can find me hanging out in between videos. And if you want to support the channel like these wonderful people on the screen, you can do so by going to my Patreon page. Links for all these places are in the description. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you in any way. Every smash of that button helps the channel grow and allows me to get more content out to you. But until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.